Okay, so we've downloaded the engine. We've actually created and played an exercise or a basic template that was created for us, and we saw just how easy it was to go ahead and test out and play a game that we have open in the engine. So it's actually really easy to develop because we can just simply hit play and start playing our game right here in the engine, and that way we can sort of get a feel for how it feels in game, and we can make tweaks and adjustments as we see fit. So now that you have come this far, you're probably looking at the engine here and seeing all of these different options and icons and buttons, and thinking maybe this is a little bit overwhelming, and you don't know what all these things mean. And the truth is, it's actually a really easy menu system to navigate through once you sort of get the hang of it and sort of know what the different sections are. So in this video, we're going to sort of take each section of this menu one by one and sort of explain its basic functionality and go through some attributes and just show you sort of an overall high-level overview of the engine and the different sections. So up here at the top, this first section here, this big ribbon, this is known as the tab bar and the menu bar. So the tab bar is just like any sort of application you're probably familiar with, especially if you're using Windows. You've got tabs up here. Other tabs can be docked up here, so you can open a bunch of other smaller windows, but then you could tab them and dock them up here, so you could switch between tabs. The current tab that by default is always open is basically showing you the name of the current map or the current level that you're in. You see, you can have multiple levels or maps, and the current map is going to show you its name here in the top tab. Now the menu bar also has some options to the right. I'm not going to explain these three icons. You should be familiar with them. Basically, close, minimize or maximize. Those are standard buttons. You'll see this little icon here that's got a little sort of beacon, and this is a tutorial button. If you hover over it, you can click on it and it'll walk you through some tutorials that will sort of explain the overall different sections, and I encourage you to do that if you're curious, and that will explain some things that we're going to go over now. If you hover over where it says rolling ball, that's showing you the name of this project. So I named this project Rolling Ball, and if you hover over it, it'll tell you some information about the version of Unreal Engine. So this is the version 4.22.1. That's the version of Unreal Engine that I'm currently using, and you're going to see the engine version that you're using. Now the version is not too important, especially for these videos, because we're getting you used to basically how to use the engine, and pretty much most, if not all, of these things that we learn are version independent. Very few things actually get deprecated or taken out as versions get upgraded. Typically more features are added in. Sometimes stuff gets taken out, but for the purposes of this video, you won't have to worry about that. Okay, so that takes care of the tab and menu bar. Now I'd like you to take a look just below that, and you'll see that we've got this bar here up in the middle, and this is known as the toolbar, and it's called the toolbar because it gives you icons for commonly used tools, and these are basically things that are done frequently, and that's why they're right here at your disposal. For saving current, this is for saving the current level that you're working in. So for our example, we're looking at the rolling ball template level, and if we made some changes to this level, we could easily save it by clicking here. Source control has to do with using source control packages, software packages such as Git and Perforce. These are things that allow you to basically, especially when working with a big team, you want to control the versions. As you're making changes to a large project, you will submit those to some source control system, which will allow you to create different branches of the same project. So if you're making changes and a partner programmer or artist is making other changes, then you can merge them and reconcile any conflicts So that's what source control is, and there's built-in functionality to integrate that into your projects, which we're not going to get to in this series, but just know that it's there. Here, content opens the content browser, which is down here. It's already down here, but we'll get to the content browser. Marketplace opens up the asset store that you can buy assets in for your project. Settings is self-explanatory. There's a bunch of settings here and options that you can get to, and you can get to a lot of these by other means, by other menus. Blueprints is a tab that allows you to do things like open a particular blueprint, and we're going to get to what blueprints are, and open the level blueprint, which we'll get to what that is as well. Cinematics has to do with more cinematic things, such as creating a sort of movie-like reel that is watched sort of like a movie rather than interactively played. Build has to do with building any changes, and this is basically akin to compiling and programming. It's basically translating all of the instructions that you've told your game logic to do into a language the computer can understand. Now you have this play, and if you look at the drop down next to play, we have different modes of playing, and we're going to get into those, but the basic play in this level option is there by default, and that was what we saw when you click play and then click into the viewport. You then have access to control the ball and actually play the game, and then of course hitting escape lets you get out of that. Now continuing, you'll see launch, and launch has to do with packaging this up into a version that you would see in the final actual game. And there's different options here. You'll see, if you click the drop down, you'll see any connected devices. For example, I'm just running on a laptop, so you see my laptop here, but if we're building for mobile, say I have like an Android phone plugged in via USB, then you would see the name of the phone here and you would know that it's connected, and then you'd be able to actually launch it on your phone. And so we're gonna see that in future videos. So this is the toolbar. This has just common icons for things that you use frequently in the game. Next, you'll see this over here, the modes panel, and the modes has to do with representing different modes that you would develop with. And you'll see that if you take a look at these icons here, the very left one says place, and this is for placing actors in your scene. And you are probably wondering, what is an actor? And just take a look inside of the viewport here. You'll see boxes, you'll see objects. Each object in the world is an actor. If you can place it in the world, you can safely say that that thing that you placed in the world is an actor. And so this mode is the most common because it's used to place actors in the world. If you click on this paintbrush here, you'll see the paint mode, and the paint mode is for painting things in the world, particularly vertex colors and textures on actors that are in the viewport. So you could paint directly on things. So that's an interesting feature. Next, you'll see landscape, and as its name suggests, this is for editing landscapes. So you can actually create something that looks more like mountains or rolling hills. This is a tool that you can use to do that. Foliage is sort of like landscape, but for painting foliage, instanced foliage in the world. So vines, leaves, things like that. If you have the assets, you can actually paint them in just like a painter's brush strokes. Geometry editing is for editing brushes. So brushes are a specific type of geometry. They're sort of like vector graphics in that they are defined by the coordinates of their meshes, of their vertices on their meshes, and you can edit them by editing the brushes in this mode. Now, brushes typically are used to box out geometry to sort of prototype a level, and you typically don't use them in a packaged final build because you want optimized things that are easy for the computer to compute for you, and you want your performance to be as good as possible. But brushes can be useful when designing a level. So that is the modes panel, and as I said, the most common mode that we're going to be working in is this one, the one that says place. And you'll also notice that hitting Shift +1 will take you to that. Shift 2 will bring you to the paint. Shift 3 will bring you to the landscape, and so on. So in general, you can hover over something to see its hotkey if it has one. And notice it says hit Control Alt for more. If you do Control Alt on a Windows PC, you'll see that it actually gives you more information. So that's another trick that you can use in the editor to learn more about things in the editor. So that's the modes. Now I want you to take a look down here at the content browser. Now the content browser is sort of like a file explorer in Windows, and it basically shows you different folders and the assets that are contained in the folders. And you can of course double click on various folders and open up to see their contents. So if I double click on maps, you'll see that right here, a rolling BP example map. That's the name up here at the top tab here, and that's because that's the level that we're looking at. And this level is saved as an asset. And if you hover over it, you'll see in parentheses it says level, and that's the type of asset that it is. Now, if you want to get around in the content browser, you've got some sort of controls here. For example, you got this back key, icon. If you click back, you'll go back to where you were before. And up at the top left here, you'll see Show or Hide Sources Panel. So click on that, and you'll see that we've got this hierarchical view of the folders in our game. And at the top level, we have the content folder. So everything is in the content folder. And as it stands here, now we have 4 different folders in the content folder: geometry, rolling BP, and starter content. Now these are just things that were automatically created for us because we chose to create the rolling ball template. So geometry has a folder in it called meshes. If we double click on that, you'll see the different meshes used to create this level. And you may have noticed that looking in the level, there are very basic shapes: spheres, boxes, and cubes, and things like that. And all of these are just some version of these meshes that we have here. So this shows you that these mesh assets are what your project has, and you can actually use them to create more things. And we'll get to creation very shortly. Next, you have the rolling folder, and in the rolling folder, you've got materials and meshes. If you double click on the meshes, you'll see the ball mesh, and that's the actual ball that we've been using in the level, controlling and rolling around and things. And so this is the actual mesh used for that. And you'll see it's got a material applied to it, this white and blue sort of beach ball almost looking material. And if you click on the materials, you'll see all of the materials used in this particular level. So you'll see the one for the ball, you'll see the gold orange metal material used for these boxes here, and so you'll sort of see very quickly that this level doesn't use very many different materials. They're all right here. If you click on rolling BP, then you'll see some blueprints, and we're going to get more into what blueprints are throughout this course. But clicking on the blueprints folder here, you'll see that this ball that here sits in the level isn't just a mesh, but it's actually a blueprint. And you'll see that we have something called a game mode. We'll get into that as well. Now, one of the more exciting things that you'll want to see as a new beginner is the starter content folder. The starter content folder contains many other folders inside of it, and these are the content that you get when you chose to include starter content when creating a new project. When you include starter content, you get a bunch of extra stuff, and these are not things that exist in this level yet, but you can put them in. For example, look at the architecture. You'll see a bunch of different meshes that are appropriate for creating architecture. For example, you got walls and things that look like they have a door hole cut out of it. You got platforms and columns and pillars and things. You can check out that you have audio here, and if you click on any of these, you can hear the audio associated with these sound assets. You've got some blueprints, and these are basically built-in blueprints that come with starter content, and you'll understand these more as we create our own blueprints and see exactly what blueprints are. Other things that are relevant are maps. You've got some maps that you can double click on to see examples of levels, sort of like the one that we have here. You've got materials that you can use to play with, and we'll get into very quickly how to use these materials. Particles, these are things like special effects like steam, sparks, fire, explosions, and the starter content includes some of these that we can work with as well. So these are very exciting once you start getting into those, and we'll get into those very shortly. If you click on the props, you'll see some things that are a little bit more sort of finalized game assets. So rather than just basic geometry, you've got things like chairs, bushes, doors, lamps, and things like that, tables, a statue, a rock. So these are things that look more like what you would see in a finalized game, and we're going to use these very shortly as well. Shapes are some additional geometry. You got cubes, cones, capsule, pyramid. These are things that you can use to sort of help you to prototype and even build basically basic blocked out version of your level. And then, of course, textures. Now, textures are used in materials. These are things like images, normal maps, and if you don't know what that is, don't worry. We're going to explain these things in time, but these are basically the different assets that come together when making materials. Because if you go back to the materials folder, you'll see that these materials look quite intricate. Some of them, they look like real bricks and grass and things like that. And you'll see that when we use them in the level that they react to the light very realistically. You'll see the nooks and crannies and cracks between the bricks, and they'll look very realistic. And that all has to do with creating the materials. And materials are created using those images and those texture assets. So that is the content browser. And as you can see, you can navigate it just like any sort of folder explorer, especially if you're used to Windows, but Mac has something similar. So this should be quite easy to grasp. So next, what we're going to look at is the viewport. And this viewport is something that we used basically when we hit the play button. We sort of immersed ourselves in the viewport here. The viewport is basically used to see what's in the world. And as we'll see very shortly, we can look around, we can navigate throughout it, and not only that, we can actually play the game here in the viewport. At the top right, we'll see the tab called World Outliner, and the World Outliner is a very useful window here. What it has is a tree-like hierarchy of all the items in the world. So basically, if you select one of these things, you'll see in the world, I selected this first template cube here, and you'll see that it highlighted this cube here, and that's because I selected it. So now this actual cube in the world is selected, and if you're having a hard time finding something in your world, you can just look at it here. You can even search for it in the search bar if you know what the asset's called. And so basically selecting items here is equivalent to selecting them in the world. And so this is a very useful thing that we can use to organize and take a look at what's in the world. You can delete things directly from here by clicking on it and hitting the delete key, but we'll get to that when we start actually making things. You can hit this eye icon, so you'll notice I have the first cube selected and it's selected here in the world. If I hit the eye icon, it makes it invisible, so it's still there but you can't see it. And that's useful for working with things that may be hidden behind walls and things like that. You can make the walls invisible while you're developing and turn that visibility back on later. So that's the World Outliner. You've got the number of actors here. That's the number of objects in the world. It says 104 actors, one selected. I can, by the way, hold down Shift and click and select multiple objects at a time, and you'll see here now it says 5 selected. So that's sort of a useful little tidbit there. Now, just below the World Outliner, you have the Details panel. Now, the Details panel is one of the most useful things, and we'll use this probably more than any other thing other than maybe the viewport and the content browser. The details panel tells you details about anything that you have selected at the time. So for now, I have this cube selected, and you'll see in the details panel that it's showing the name of this asset. You can rename it, and you've got in this bottom drop down here in this bottom menu, you have different sections. This one says transform, this one says static mesh. And you'll see that this is just basic information about this particular actor, and you can alter it. You can alter its location, rotation, scale, mesh, all that stuff, and we'll get to that in future videos. So the details panel is very, very useful. Now, you may not see this world settings tab, and I have it open because I've opened it before. And you can easily open the world settings by going up here to the settings here in the toolbar, hitting the drop down and clicking world settings. And world settings appears here next to the details panel, and this has additional settings for the world that you're in. And we're going to get into that very shortly as well. So don't worry if you feel a little overwhelmed with all of these different sections, and if you might be confused as to why we have a particular section. That's okay. That's very normal for beginners because there's just so much to learn and to look at. And so my advice to you is just take this one video at a time, and we're going to ease you into things very easily, smoothly, and you're going to learn things one thing at a time. And by the end of it, you'll know what all these things do in great detail, and you're going to be an expert at maneuvering around in this editor. Just know that it's very exciting that we have all these so many options, because they make creating games extremely easy, efficient, and quick, and you can make games very efficiently with all of the options in the editor. So that concludes this video of the overall high-level overview of the different menus and options in the editor. And in the next video, we're going to get into some more dynamic, creative activities, such as moving things around and maneuvering throughout our level. So stay tuned.